The Venezuelan opposition presidential candidate Edmundo González arrived in Spain seeking asylum amid a political and diplomatic crisis over Venezuela's disputed July election.
El Congreso de los Diputados acaba de votar a favor de que el gobierno reconozca a Edmundo González como presidente electo de Venezuela.
El reconocimiento de Edmundo González Urrutia como ganador de las elecciones presidenciales de Venezuela.
Lamentablemente, el régimen de Maduro ha ignorado abiertamente los compromisos allí acordados, incluso frente a garantes internacionales.
You see a solution to what's going on with the current impasse between the opposition and Edmundo González Urrutia and Nicolas Maduro?
It's sad that it's happening in Venezuela. Paraguay have the moral right to express strongly support to the democracy in this country. It's unacceptable today what is happening. The government of Nicolas Maduro up to now didn't show the act of the elections. They don't have the answer, don't give the answers to the international community. What happens with the election, with the results, and up to now, we don't accept Nicolas Maduro as president-elected. The model that is following Venezuela today is like Nicaragua or like Cuba, and that is a challenge for our region because we have the migration problem.
Yourself, Minister, is nominated by your president to be a candidate for the next Secretary General of the OAS.
The multilateral system is the most important instrument for the development, for the quality, for be in the global agenda. OAS need to build a new brand.
And is the brand of the organization, not of the Secretary General.
La carta democrática la pueden hacer así, mira. Ponerla en un tubito bien fino y darle mejor uso, señor Almagro. Métase su carta democrática por donde le quepa. A Venezuela se respeta y a Venezuela nadie le va a aplicar ninguna carta.
Welcome to the Border Wars podcast. We're the number one podcast in all of the Americas, the only bilingual podcast that takes you beyond the border. Now, I say we're the number one podcast not because of me, but because of our guests. And today we have a very, very special guest, and I'm very honored to be able to welcome the Foreign Minister of the Republic of Paraguay, Mr. Rubén Ramírez Lezcano. Foreign Minister, it's a pleasure and an honor to have you here in Washington, D.C.
Thank you very much, Joseph. It's a pleasure for me to be here, and thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. Well, I know you're going to be tight on time, so I want to get right to the point, but I want our audience to get to know you. We have a primarily Latin American audience, also a U.S. Latino audience, and I'd like for them to get to know you because when I was reading your biography, one, very impressive, multidimensional, and you have a background in business, you have a background in international affairs, you have a background in economics, and as a fellow economist, I can say I very much appreciate that. But fundamentally, your main line of work has been diplomatic. You have had a long diplomatic career since 1989.
35 years.
35 years, quite a long diplomat, almost two careers in some respects. And you know what grabbed my attention when I was reading your biography that you joined the Diplomatic Corps of Paraguay in 1989 was the year of the fall of the Berlin Wall. So how was that? How did that motivate you? Go take us back to your beginning of how you joined diplomatic service in Paraguay. What inspired you to join, and how the current events of the time took you to where you are today?
When I started study, I went to Buenos Aires from Paraguay, and at this time started the democracy process in Argentina with Raúl Alfonsín as president. In my country, we have had the dictatorship, Alfredo Stroessner, and that was quite interesting for me, knowing a democratic process in Argentina. Then when I went to France, I learned more about the view of the world in my academic formation also. And since our country started the democracy process in 1989, I was invited for the government, for the General Andrés Rodríguez, to join his government. And the challenge was, well, we need to put Paraguay in the world. And very small country, since the proportion of South America, Paraguay is bigger than France or like Spain.
In land mass.
In land. Yeah. But it's a landlocked country.
Yeah.
And we have very small population, around 6.5 million inhabitants, and very young. The reason I was very inspired because we started to build the regional integration process with Mercosur, and then working to our participation in more and more multilateral organizations. And that means a very interesting challenge for myself, professionally, but personally also.
What time frame was this when you were in Mercosur?
1999 was signed the agreement, Tratado de Asunción, but we started the negotiation at the end of 1989.
Oh, very good. And so you went already into the multilateral space as a diplomat. What brought you full circle to become essentially, you were foreign minister under a previous government, to come back into government? Because you went into the private sector for a little while, right? After you, I want to say retired, but you left government service for a while.
Yes. Well, because we have now the challenge of the new generation. We have had 35 years of regime of dictatorship. And then we end last year 35 years of democracy.
Okay.
I started my diplomatic career at this time, and the country changed so quickly, but so deeply also.
Give us some examples.
For example, on economics, we are today a country that have a very stable institutions, strong fundamentals on macroeconomics, and that means that we reduce the poverty in almost 25%.
Wow.
And that means that on democracy, we can build the wellness of our people and give everybody the social inclusion that we need to have more interesting conditions to grow the economy with equality.
So Paraguay was able to eradicate 25% of its poverty throughout the period of democracy?
Yes, today we have almost 24% of poverty. Okay. At this time, when it started in 1989, we work with a team in the economic reform, the independence of the central bank. We work on macroeconomic policies. Today we have a very strong economy. The Paraguayan currency, the Guarani, accomplished next October 81 years.
Okay.
And we don't raise any zero
inflation
for our currency. That means, well, the economic stability and the economic growth was in the democratic process, and the poverty reduced today at 22-24%.
So what is the inflation right now in Paraguay?
3.8% per year.
That's better than us.
And growing about 4.5%.
Oh, that's especially, that's better than the United States. It's also tremendously good for South America. South America, Argentina, Venezuela, some countries have very high inflation. What's this key to success? How have you guys been able to do that?
Well, strengthening institutions like the central bank, the independence of this very important tool for economy, but also the human resources, the value of the professionals on economics, and also the engagement and commitment not only of the politicians, but also for the people of our country that understood we don't have shortcuts. We have to work our development, committed and joining everybody to get the goals.
Yeah, I think the few times I've been to Paraguay, I can attribute to that. You guys are very hardworking people. In Paraguay, they work very hard. So let me get back to your background a little bit and ask kind of a big question. Out of 35 years of experience in public service and a diplomatic career, give us an example of one of your biggest challenges you've had over your 35 years. I'm sure there's many, but one that sticks out that's kind of maybe relevant to today, relevant to the problems that you guys are facing current times.
First of all, Paraguay is a very unknown country. It's a landlocked country which depends on our connections, the infrastructure, all the development that we need if to be connected in the world. When I started my career, we talked about that before this interview, there wasn't many tools to communicate, to be in the spot in the world, and that was a very important challenge. And I returned to the diplomatic activity because the President Peña, he's a very young man, very professional, and he's only 45 years old, and he invited me. We need to challenge, we have the challenge today to grow up and to put in another step our country. And that is a very interesting challenge for me, for my country, for my people. But also I'm in condition to support this challenge that President Peña put on my way, this opportunity. And I very thanks him for the confidence to me. But also because Paraguay have today all the opportunities to contribute with the world. We are in front of so many challenges. The geopolitical challenge that we have, the tensions among the most important countries, the situation of China, United States. Then we have 52 conflicts in the world today. The most evident, Russia, Ukraine, Israel, Hamas, but also the tension, Taiwan, China, and in Africa, in African countries, we have so many challenges. But also the challenge among the needs to be more safe. The security issue is very important with the organized crime internationally. They are very important. They have important infrastructure more than the government's opportunity, and they are more integrated than governments. And that is a challenge today to get the priority and are different. Sometimes you have drug trafficking, then you have the migration issue and the situation of money laundering, and well, there are many challenges, and the security is a very important issue in the global agenda also, but in our hemisphere situation where we have different views and different challenge. And even if in South America and Central America we speak the same language, there are many nuances and many differences. And we have to work on those issues also to be comprehensive. And well, the other challenge is the growth, the economy. The development challenge is quite important to fight against poverty. You know, South America today have the most important production in the world. And in the case of Paraguay, we are 6.5 million inhabitants, and we produce food for 100 million people.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's not understandable, it is unacceptable to have poverty, to have hunger in our country.
Is there hunger? Is there famine in Paraguay?
Yes, they are in structural poverty among 12% of our population. And we are fighting again this issue. And the face of the poverty is the child, the young people, the young population. And that is the reason why we are quite committed on those challenges that we have.
You touched on a lot of things, Minister, and I think I'm gonna unpack that a little bit so we can start to delve a little bit deeper into each one of those. Let me begin with your geopolitical vision. Paraguay is a very interesting country to the United States, beyond being just an ally, because you guys have upheld democracy for 35 plus years, but also because you have maintained relations with Taiwan in a time where that's becoming less and less common. I think maybe the largest country?
The largest country, and the only one in South America.
The only one in South America, correct. You also maintain good relationships with Israel, despite a lot of efforts internationally to isolate Israel. We see that here in the United States at the universities. We see it in Europe as well. And in other parts of Latin America. Very surprisingly, some countries cut off diplomatic relations this year after the terrorist attack of Hamas in Gaza. And I think also, even trying to bring it down regionally, I always looked at Paraguay as kind of a buffer between two big countries, Brazil and Argentina. And while maybe previously some presidents would consider that a challenge, I think when I met President Peña last year, along with yourself, they presented it as an opportunity. They said, Brazil needs us, Argentina needs us. So now we have two customers here that we can be able to work in. But tell us a little bit about your geopolitical vision of both how you see the world related to these conflicts in Taiwan, impending conflicts in Taiwan, what's going on in Israel, obviously Ukraine, but also how that affects Latin America as a whole.
150 or 160 years ago, Paraguay was the most important people. We have the first train in the region, and we have the 90% of our people educated, and the country growing. We don't have at this time poverty. And our neighbors decide through a secret treaty to go to deliver a war against Paraguay. From 1864 to 1870, three countries, Argentina, Brazil, and Uruguay, fights against Paraguay, and we lose the 60% of our territory and the 90% of our male population.
90%?
90%.
Wow. Then I realized that.
It was an Holocaust.
Wow.
And we understand what and how are difficult to grow without any cooperation. At this time, Paraguay was so alone. The Paraguayans know very well the difficulties that we got to started to put again our country in the development way. Then we have 1932 to 1935 a war against Bolivia.
The Chaco, yeah.
The Chaco Wars. Yeah. And since 1954 to 1989, the Stroessner regime.
Yeah, dictatorship. Yeah.
And that is the situation in which a country today we have so deep installs the principles of freedom, democracy, and human rights.
It's interesting.
And that is why we understand really the situation, for example, that you mentioned, Taiwan. We accomplished this year in October 67 years of diplomatic relation. And
is that the longest?
The longest.
In the world?
Yeah. For Taiwan.
For Taiwan, yeah.
And since Taiwan installed as a country, we recognize them. That is not only a tradition, not only an opportunity of our relation for the cooperation with Taiwan. No, it's because the principle.
Yeah.
And Taiwan have an elephant also as a neighbor.
Yeah, they do.
And well, we promote the respect of those values and principles, freedom, democracy, human rights, and also our relation with Taiwan is about the knowledge transfer, very coordinated on public policies, among health, among the education. We have almost 1,600 students in engineering in Taiwan, because we are looking to get the next step development of our country on technology. And also, we think the next, Paraguay and even South America never will export to China products with add value.
Okay.
Only raw materials.
Yeah, okay. So not on the higher of the structure production.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
consumer goods.
Even if we don't have today diplomatic relation with China, is the main country that give us, we have a imbalance on our trade, but $5 billion per year.
It's a market.
Yep.
Yeah.
Market.
Yeah.
And Taiwan is the most important market for example, beef.
Okay.
And also represent a very important ally in the Indo-Pacific way. And we are working very close with South Korea.
Okay.
Very close with Japan.
Yeah.
Very close with Singapore. Very close with India. And that means that we are integrated in those countries that have the same view of us in the security in the China Sea.
And you're also diversifying.
Yeah. About Israel, Paraguay was the country that gave his vote to create the nation of Israel.
Wow.
In 1967. Yeah. And the Paraguayan feel very close to the Israel people for their history. And that happened in last October is unacceptable today. The terrorism, and we are supporting Israel to the self-defense against those terrorism. And that is not an ideological position. Paraguay never have had in diplomacy ideological position. We are not left or right. We are looking for the right.
Okay.
And to go
the other kind of right, yeah.
Yes. And that means that we are very committed to build the best relation among the countries to get our goals on development, on human rights, on freedom, and on democracy.
So if I understood right, let me see if I interpret this. Paraguay's own experience through its history, both being almost evaporated as a country, losing 90% of your male population, having to fight big wars for territory, both in the 19th century and the 20th century, gives you sort of special appreciation for countries that are facing that struggle today, such as Israel, such as Ukraine. You could even put Poland in that category. I think Poland has lost its country a few times and has always been able to resurface. But it gives you also kind of a common understanding of different countries that have a moral position on democracy, but have also an experience of common threats and challenges.
Absolutely. And an example is our position about Ukraine and Russia.
Yeah.
We have an historical relation with Russia. It was our main market on beef, for example. But the attack that they produced to Ukraine is unacceptable.
Yeah.
And the dialogue is the only way to solve the problem that they have today. And the Ukrainian people are suffering, and really they need all our support also.
No, it sounds like Paraguay's taking a real leadership position. I mean, I don't think in Latin America these issues become as important as they are for many other countries, but I think Paraguay's taken a very President Peña in particular has taken a very prominent position on these issues. Let me go into the region now with probably the country that right now, we're recording in September 2024, probably gets the most attention, which is Venezuela. There was an election, or you could call what looked like an election in July 28th of this year. And what happened was what most people, I think, expected to happen. There was an electoral fraud that was done by the government of Nicolas Maduro. And now you see kind of a stalemate, so to speak. There's obviously an opposition that has provided ballots and evidence that suggests that they won by an overwhelming number, I think 4 million votes, upwards of 70% of the vote, but they don't have they don't have necessarily the tools or the institutions in the country to go through a transition if the current government doesn't want to relinquish control or power. I think Paraguay President Peña, yourself, have been very vocal on this. I think we're one of the more countries that take one of the first positions on this in the region. But talk to us about Venezuela, because that's going to allow us to then transition into another part of the conversation. We could talk about the OAS and the role of the OAS. But tell us about your position on Venezuela, how you see it today. Do you see a solution to what's going on with the current impasse between the opposition and Edmundo González Urrutia and Nicolas Maduro?
Yes, it's sad that it's happening in Venezuela. Paraguay have the moral right to express strongly its support to the democracy in this country. It's unacceptable today what is happening. The government of Nicolas Maduro up to now didn't show the act of the elections. They don't have the answer, don't give the answers to the international community. What happens with the election, with the results, and up to now, we don't accept Nicolas Maduro as president-elected. And the situation of the opposition to the government is also unacceptable. For us, it's quite important to understand that there are so many differences among the electoral authorities expressed without the support of the information, the transparency, and they did not accept the observers for the election, and the only one observer, they report that it was not true, the results.
The Carter Center.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, the situation is very delicate because the democracy is not working. The human rights is under menace, and they are going through the Edmundo González. We knew yesterday we knew that the fiscal asked the detention of the Edmundo González Urrutia, and that is very, very dangerous for the situation of this country. And the President Peña always said, I am able to contribute through the dialogue if that is possible. But, it's not easy at all.
Yeah.
The model that is following Venezuela today is like Nicaragua or like Cuba. And that is a challenge for our region because we have the migration problem. Is not small problem for all the region.
Do you have a lot of Venezuelan immigrants in?
We don't have a lot, but our neighbors have a lot.
Oh, yeah.
And that is a problem for our region, but also Latin America is the only, and the hemisphere, our hemisphere is the only place where there are not geographical conflict.
Oh, yeah.
Sovereignty or
interstate
against
wars.
the countries. They are not conflicts. No. And that is happening today in Venezuela. That's happening in Nicaragua. And that's happening today in Cuba. That is a challenge for our region to be the most peaceful place in the world.
Yeah. Well, actually, now that you're right. There is no interstate conflicts. There's a lot of intrastate conflicts within countries.
Exactly.
But as of yet, there hasn't been a country declaring a war on another country since, well, maybe you could have a little bit of wars that they had in the 90s and 80s of, I think it was Honduras and El Salvador, and then they had Peru and Ecuador. But the Chaco War, probably the last big war of Pacific was before that. But I'd say what concerns me, and I think a lot of people, my colleagues here in the defense community, is not just Venezuela's authoritarian grip on its country, which we've had to wrestle with this for now several years, but potentially its incursions against its neighbors, and we're concerned about this. And I'm going to mention one in particular. Over the last year, there's been focus on a military buildup of Venezuela on its eastern neighbor, Guyana. Guyana being the head of the Caribbean community, CARICOM, has expressed a lot of concern about this. Now, thankfully, nothing has happened as of today. But what would change the dynamics if Venezuela was to do something militarily against Guyana? And I'm not saying an invasion or anything like Ukraine. I'm just saying any armed action against a neighbor. How does it change the balance of power inside the region, knowing that we haven't had this conflict in such a long time?
We are very committed in the peace process building, because sometimes with those kind of government try to distract the attention of the people is creating a war. And the challenge for Guyana is not easy at all. Brazil is dealing with this issue, and United States also, but we are very concerned and committed to collaborate and to cooperate in this process if this start again to be a issue on the regional agenda.
Do you guys have an ongoing dialogue with Guyana?
Yes. I'm going to visit early. During the appointment of the President Abinader in Santo Domingo, in Dominican Republic, President Peña spoke with the Prime Minister of Guyana. We will have a meeting with the President of Guyana to give there the opportunity and the possibility for us to cooperate with the dialogue with Venezuela if that is possible.
Yeah, one of the things I kind of noticed, I've been to Guyana on recent occasions, and it's a country that has, it's almost like a cousin of Latin America to some respects, because it's not the same culture, it's not the same language. In fact, I think they're surrounded by 3 different languages: Dutch, Portuguese, and Spanish. And they're an English-speaking country. Yeah. I think the largest English-speaking country in the Caribbean. But they have a lot of clout within the Caribbean community, along with Barbados, which is very close to them. And it's interesting because oftentimes I think over time they felt left out of some of the regional issues that have been developed. Matter of fact, Venezuela, in many respects, even though it's their neighbor, they really never really had an understanding of what was happening inside Venezuela. Absolutely. And maybe because of language and cultural barriers, they didn't have much knowledge sharing with other partners in Latin America. One of the things I think that, and I've said this to some of the officials in Guyana, that they're going to need to think about how to reintegrate themselves with the rest of Latin America. Because as the rest of Latin America is concerned about Venezuela for many reasons, for democracy, for human rights, for immigration, for transnational organized crime, they're going to need to hear your concerns and how you guys can cooperate to make sure this problem doesn't get worse. And in that, I've seen some efforts on their end to bridge this gap. But that leads me to the question of how you see the Caribbean as a whole, because the Caribbean is a part of the Latin America and the Caribbean that I call it the cousin of South and Central America, because while there is some cultural and language differences, we live in the same neighborhood. We all share the same waters and the same trade routes. How do you see the Caribbean's role in regional stability, security, prosperity?
I look in the Caribbean country as a very important opportunity for the development, for the class, social inclusion. And, there are, the first barrier is the language.
Yeah.
The second one is we don't know each other. And I don't see efforts to build the bridge with South America and Central America with the Caribbean countries. You know, we are very together, working very close together. Paraguay is very committed with Haiti, for example. The situation in Haiti is unacceptable. And we are very close from the government of Haiti. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs have been in Paraguay. And really, we understand that it's quite important to restart, to build the bridge between Latin American and Caribbean country. And sometimes only for the votes, they means. And no way, we have to be closer. For example, tourism, the challenge of security, development. We have so many opportunities to cooperate and to work close together. And really, it's important that we have today the opportunity with the new tools of the communication to be closer from those countries. And I'm making all the effort as Paraguayan, but because we feel the same.
Yeah.
Paraguay is an island. and our writer says always Paraguay is a island is surrounded by land.
Yeah.
And those islands, we feel the same with them. How do you feel?
That's an interesting point.
Yes, we are in island.
No, because I was thinking the same thing. Like
the writer Augusto Roa Bastos, in his book, said the first time, well, Paraguay is an island surrounded by land.
Yeah.
And that is the only country in South America that understands really the situation of those islands.
No, that's a very interesting point. Especially as you were saying that, I was thinking also what I just said about Guyana, 3 languages. Mm-hmm. You guys also have many languages around you. You have Portuguese, you have Spanish, obviously, but
Guarani.
Guarani is the second official language.
Our native language, the Guarani, the 80% of our population speak, myself also. And we have a recognition of our more deep culture. Guarani is our currency, Guarani is our music, the Guarania, that will consider it as a patrimony immaterial of humanity by UNESCO next December in Asunción. We respect our native people, and there are a mix of our population, and that is our special culture. Because the war of the Triple Alliance, Paraguay did not receive a lot of immigration.
Yeah.
And that was created with the different immigration that we received then in the last years, and a very special culture, but very integrated in the world. Because we need to speak Portuguese, we need to speak English, we need to speak French, and that really to be integrated in the world, that is our challenge also.
No, that's a very interesting point. You guys do have a lot of that shared experience, and I think the Caribbean could relate to you in that respect, because you're not officially an island, but you really much are an island culturally because of the way the neighborhood surrounds you.
Absolutely, and the agenda of Trinidad and Tobago, I have so many friends, or Jamaica, are not the same.
Yeah, that's true.
You have Barbados, they have another agenda. And
that's a good point.
We need to be very focused on what kind of cooperation we can build together.
No, that's good. Another good point, because I visited the Caribbean quite a bit, and there's this notion that the Caribbean is monolithic when it's really mosaic, right? They're not the same countries. I mean, they're in the same geographic territory, but even if they have the commonality of English speaking, such as, South America has the commonality of Spanish speaking, but Argentina is very different from Colombia,
Exactly.
So we have the same thing in the Caribbean. So let me pivot now to something that I think is on the agenda for a lot of countries in the region, which is the role of the Organization of American States. So this past June, they held the General Assembly in Asunción in Paraguay. And at the General Assembly, it was announced that yourself, Minister, is nominated by your president to be a candidate for the next Secretary General of the OAS. You could explain to us how the election works and the time frame and what is needed to become this next Secretary General of the OAS. But also tell us a little about your vision of the OAS. The OAS has been, I think, one of the largest multilateral organizations in the Western Hemisphere, if not the largest. It is also very much notable in terms of democracy because it's it's a defender of the interdemocratic charter. But it goes well beyond that. I think it's also a multidimensional security in 2001 has signed. They've also done a lot on these issues that we've talked about in terms of Venezuela and in the Caribbean. Tell us your vision of the OAS and what prompted you to want to become the next Secretary General of this organization.
Well, the inspiration of my candidacy is about the president and myself. We are very committed with the multilateral system. Small country like Paraguay, like Caribbean countries, like Central American countries, the multilateral system is the most important instrument for the development, for the equality, for be in the global agenda. And President Peña said, well, Ruben, we need to work on that, not only statements. Mm-hmm. And he proposed my candidacy to our hemisphere, inspired on that. We are committed with the hemisphere integration. Mm. That is the reason why I am candidate. I feel we are now ending the first quarter of the century. And the organization is still working in so few issues that we need to change. We need the modernization of the OAS. And what means that? We need to have a very cautious agenda in each country. We need a program per country because there are nuances and strong differences among different regions. Mm. You have needs for Central America, but other for Caribbean. For South America, it's quite different. Secondly, there are a few countries that receive all the support of OAS because the donators, because the agenda and the own capacity of those countries to attract the OAS action. And that is the reason why OAS need to build a new brand. Mm. And is the brand of the organization, not of the Secretary General.
Of course, yeah.
We don't need to personalize the organization and how do you build that? Discussing among countries what they need really to understand the priorities for each country and to develop a special agenda of programs for each country. And the second issue is that OAS is the only organization in the hemisphere that have the political mandate for its works. And are 4 pillars.
For what again?
For the pillars of the mandate of the government for OAS is the only organization in the hemisphere that have the clear mandate.
Okay.
Human rights,
yeah.
Democracy, and strengthening institution. The third one is development. We need to increase the opportunity, and those is through education, through market access, to create an opportunity on trade, and create an opportunity of development, transfer of technology. Nobody speak about artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
We need this new agenda for the development. And the other pillar is about security. And those 4 pillars for our region are quite important. Some countries need more support on security, others more on development agenda, education, but we need to understand the common denominator, to understand what one our countries in the hemisphere as an agenda of OAS. And the budget is a challenge, but it's not all that. We need to focus on a very important programs and giving those countries the opportunity to get the results of the action.
Yeah.
Because from the word to the action, there are enormous distance today.
Yeah, that's true. Let me jump into the 4th pillar, the one that you mentioned about security, because I often feel the OAS has gotten kind of a backseat role on this, even though they have very important institutions within security. They have the, I believe it's the Secretariat on Counterterrorism, the CITE. They have a department on combating transnational organized crime. They have, the Secretariat of Multidimensional Security. And so they have a lot of these institutions that deal with these issues. But from my understanding, and this is, I haven't engaged the OAS as much on this, but from, being at different meetings and conferences, I've always noticed that this kind of takes a back seat oftentimes to the other pillars, human rights, democracy, and development. And not that those are they're all important, and I think all countries need all of it. But looking at the challenges today with transnational organized crime, with international terrorism, with human trafficking, weapons trafficking, just the challenges that we face, corruption, it seems to me that a lot of countries struggle to deal with the other 3, human rights, development, and democracy, because that pillar is failing. That pillar is not working. Would there be an effort to strengthen the cooperation on regional security, perhaps maybe on fighting transnational organized crime in the OAS if you were to become the Secretary General?
Yes, that will be a priority in our agenda. Discussing with the countries individually and collectively, they all agree, and I also agree with them, that security is a very important issue. The security authorities from the hemisphere met 20 years ago at the last time.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Wow.
And we need to restart the talks with the government, with the security authorities, and also with the multilateral finance organizations like CAF, Development Bank of Latin America and Caribbean, IDB, World Bank, because they are working on those issues also, cooperating with the countries. But the challenge is, we need an agenda. We need the opportunity to discuss. And as a side event in the General Assembly celebrated in Asunción, the Lima was development and security for our region development. And that was the opportunity to have a side event on security. Yeah. And the Minister of Security of the almost 20 countries was there discussing, but we need also to be closer, the fiscal authorities, the judiciary authorities, because sometimes the crimes happens in one part of the continent and the other one is, outside of that. And in the hemisphere, we need to understand, we have to work very close together. What happened with your fight strongly against drug trafficking? They move.
Yeah, the balloon effect.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The balloon effect is quite interesting what happened in Mexico and the Central American countries like Guatemala and El Salvador, etc. Those are issues that we need to discuss and to be as a priority in the hemisphere agenda.
Yeah, no, very well said. And I think there's another issue that comes up a lot when I travel to the region, and obviously it's a big issue for here in the United States, which is immigration and border security. And so I've had this conversation a lot with different ministers in Latin America, particularly security ministers, interior ministers, and I tell them that we all have this kind of commitment to uphold democracy. We all belong in this international community that has transitioned to kind of a democratic order that's being challenged, no doubt, but it's there still. But I think the adversaries to democracy have figured out that the best way to dismantle democracy is to steal sovereignty. And the best way to steal sovereignty is to attack borders, and I don't mean like physically, militarily attack them, but through organized crime, through unfettered immigration. So one of the challenges I think is immigration, right? We have a large movement of people from Central America to the United States, from Haiti throughout the Caribbean, from Venezuela, everywhere. But I don't know if that's an issue that the OAS has tackled regionally.
The migration is a very important issue on the security agenda.
On the security.
But is related all the four pillars.
Yeah, this is true.
What happened to migration? Sometimes the need of economic opportunities.
And human rights, yeah.
Because the human right, the human trafficking. Is an issue on democracy that happened today in Venezuela.
Yeah.
That means about the human rights. Well, that is the reason those four pillars are key to work on those other issues that are components of each pillar. Yeah. You have insecurity. I mix migration, but some experts say no, it's about economic development or economic opportunities.
As well.
Yeah. It's about, you need to create jobs. Okay, and that is a very important pillar on development. And also, why do you don't have the opportunity to create jobs? You need to create the most spectacular condition for education. That is our structural problem in the hemisphere. Mm-hmm. Not only in Paraguay or in Caribbean countries, in the United States also.
Yeah.
And then you have the opportunity to work on democracy. When you don't have democracy, people go. And that is what's happening in Paraguay. When Stroessner, there are more than 1 million of Paraguayans living in Argentina because of
that. Is that right?
Yes. Okay. That is we understand as Paraguayan very clearly the migration problem. And when the country is growing, we have today the challenge of human, educated, to contribute to our economic opportunity to growing. That is the reason that is a mix and balance in those four pillars. And migration is a very important key issue in our situation today. That happens with the Venezuelan in Peru, in Colombia, in Brazil, in Panama.
Yeah.
The relation with the situation between Colombia, Panama, and the United States.
Yeah. No, I think these are important. And one of the things, when I was in Argentina in Buenos Aires in July, and they were, I learned a couple of things here, and they were commemorating the 30th anniversary of the 1994 attack in Buenos Aires, the bombing of the AMIA Culture Center. I learned something about that, and I'll mention that in a second. But even beyond that, I learned, I was sitting at a dinner with the Interior Minister of Uruguay, who I believe is the pro tempore right now of Mercosur. Yeah, and he was telling me that they're creating a task force to study the Tren de Aragua among the Mercosur countries, which I think is something the United States needs to absolutely cooperate with, because here in the United States, we're having problems with Tren de Aragua in major American cities, in New York, in Chicago, in Miami, in El Paso, Texas. Even here in the Washington area, we've seen members or sympathizers of the Tren de Aragua. So there's these issues that I think they're cross-cutting that we can, on a multilateral level, cooperate with to bring people at the same table to be able to learn from experiences. I think I've always told our law enforcement here in the U.S., if you really want to learn about Tren de Aragua, talk to South America. They've been dealing with it.
We really understand that, because when through the public policy we are creating best condition of logistic or on trade, etc., like the bioceanic corridor.
Of course, yeah.
That will connect the Atlantic and Pacific, creating trade facilitations, most flexible custom services, and effective, and you also attract all those kind of organizations, and we need to work together, because you have to create opportunities for our population, but also you have to keep all the security and safe measures to create best condition for those issues.
No, absolutely. Another issue that came up, obviously, I was, for the AMI attack, the anniversal, which I believe you were there as well.
We were, the President Peña and
yes,
myself, we were there, and it was amazing because, 30 years ago, that happens, and that was an example of how coordinated was the terrorist attack.
Yeah.
And the government wasn't working together.
Yeah, no, and it's, that kind of reminded me because, 30 years ago, today, we're talking about the Middle East, Israel, Hezbollah. 30 years ago, nobody imagined Hezbollah would have the ability to do something like that on this side of the world or in South America. Even today, a lot of people don't believe it can happen, even though it already has happened. But I remember also 5 years ago, or maybe a little more, I was in Argentina, and we were holding a ministerial level counterterrorism summit. And Argentina was the first country, but then immediately after, Paraguay was the second country to designate Hezbollah and Hamas as a foreign terrorist organization. And I believe the first country for Hamas in the history of Latin America to do so. And so kind of coupling on the conversation about regional cooperation on security matters, I think an effort to cooperate greater on these international terrorist issues, Hezbollah, Hamas, would be incredibly useful, given that many countries aren't as knowledgeable about these things as others. Yeah, as maybe you guys are.
Absolutely. Paraguay is very committed to fight against terrorism because our historical relation with Israel, but not only with that, because we have had the triple border.
Yeah.
And, we are cooperating to fight against all those organizations.
I was just there.
Yeah.
I was in the tri-border.
You have been?
2 weeks. Well, I've been many times, but I was just there 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
Yeah, very nice.
That is interesting.
Yeah.
Because there are a huge trade, very close integration among the three countries, but the challenge of security is an issue.
A lot of commerce too. I mean,
absolutely.
We needed, thank you to the Paraguayan police. We had a convoy to be able to get, because it was an interesting conference where we had, the host was each country different days. So the first day was in Foz de Iguazu for the Brazilian Federal Police. Second day was in Ciudad de Este. Ciudad de Este for the Paraguayan police. And then the third day was in Iguazu, which is a little further out, and with the Argentina security forces. And what was interesting to me was if we didn't have the custodians of the Paraguayan police helping our convoy get through the borders, it would have took us like 3 hours to get to one side or the other because of the level of commerce that has between these two countries.
And that represents the opportunity. We end the construction of the bridge among Ciudad Presidente Franco and Foz de Iguazu. I still need work to be more connected for the inauguration of the new bridge.
Yeah.
And that will give an opportunity to strengthened the trade, the exchange with Brazil, but we still are far from our neighbors.
Yeah.
And I always say, well, how a lot of investment from government we have in at least 40 kilometers of distance among each other, 3 airports, 3 international airports. And when I live in Geneva, we have had a common airport between France and Switzerland.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
And what we can do that, and that are those kind of example are the opportunity to be more integrated.
No, that's a great example. I when I was at the tri-border area, really what I thought of was opportunity. They took us to Itaipu, and we were able to see, and I think that's 90% of the energy for Paraguay. Is that right? Yeah, the hydroelectric dam, and I saw this part. If they could overcome this obstacle on corruption, terror finance, money laundering, security, this could be really like a Dubai. Really, this could be an international hub for the South because of the level of development.
That we are thinking, and we are working on that with the government from Brazil, from Argentina, and also Bolivia is very close integrated with those projects that we need to be closer. Even if the distance among our capital are important, but Asunción, the capital of Paraguay, is the most close capital to the most important cities of the south.
Oh, is that right?
1 hour and a half flying to Buenos Aires, 1 hour and a half to Sao Paulo, 1 hour and a half to Santa Cruz de la Sierra. You have 2 hours and a half to Santiago, to Lima, or to Rio de Janeiro. And that means we are very close from those countries because Asunción, when was discovered by the Spanish, it was created the central for the inauguration of the cities, the most important 70 cities in our region. Yeah. That is the reason why Asunción is called Mother of the Cities.
Oh, is that right?
Yes, because all the expedition to the Buenos Aires City Foundation or Santa Cruz or even the most important cities like Posadas in Argentina, like Corrientes or others, it was created, the foundation was through an expedition from Asunción.
That's very interesting. Yeah, kind of like a Panama for the South.
Yeah.
International hub. So let me. I want to be respectful of your time. So we're gonna start to conclude. I'm gonna ask you one last question. We talked a lot about challenges. There's plenty in the region, and they're all worth considering and talking about. But give us a vision for opportunity, because I think there's a lot of opportunities in Latin America. It's a region, as you mentioned, despite all those challenges, we haven't had an interstate war, much like Europe, Middle East, even Africa, and other parts of the world are experiencing. And it's a region that obviously for the United States, it's our neighborhood. It's where we live. It's honestly where we trade and where we tourism the most. What would be a vision for Latin America in terms of capitalizing on an opportunity? What would be an opportunity that the region is missing that it could really capitalize on today?
The first, all of us is human capacity.
Yeah.
We have the most young people in the world in our region. The other countries like Europe, they are starting to need this opportunity of to have more people and human opportunity to be educated is one challenge for us, but also is an opportunity. Yeah. Secondly, trade. Third, food security. We produce all that the world need to be satisfied on food. Fourth, energy. Latin American countries produce 28% of the energy of the world, but only produce or utilize the 15% to increase that add value on those production. There are a huge opportunity on that.
Yeah.
We have also the opportunity to create in the most peaceful region in the world the best condition to grow, but to be the tourism destination of the world. We have in Caribbean countries, in Central American countries, even in countries like Brazil or Argentina, you have beaches, beautiful.
Oh, beautiful, yeah.
And but also you have the environmental region is the biggest in the world. The Amazonas, the Paraguay have 40 million of hectares, but 70 million of forest.
Yeah.
Well, you have the people that are very peaceful, and they only need opportunities. They only ask, I need to work, and we have to create those conditions to grow.
No, I think that's critically important. You know what I would add? I would add artificial intelligence. I think Latin America has a huge potential for artificial intelligence.
Yep. Yep.
And that could change many parts of the world, the economies of scale, industry.
For example, you mentioned that South America have the most important reserve of water.
Water, yeah.
That is another very important issue. Well, we have the condition, we have to create the opportunities or understand the opportunities. And I think that those multilateral organizations have the muscle to create the discussion or at least the framework to be more active and more productive, integrating our people, our discussion, our view, creating common view, and understanding the challenge that we have in front of us.
No, absolutely. Minister, I want to thank you for taking your time. I know you're on a tight agenda here in Washington, D.C., but we very much are both honored and also privileged to hear your vision for Latin America and the world, really very, very robust. And if I take one thing away from our conversation is that Paraguay, despite being a small country, it's a country that relates to a lot of other countries because of its experience that it's had, very hard experience that you've had over the last 250 years that relates you to all the things that are going on in the world. And in the case of, like we talked about with the Caribbean, in many respects, you can look like as an island, a landlocked island that allows you to relate to even the Caribbean countries in a way that perhaps other countries in Latin America do not. So it sounds like Paraguay has a special role in what Latin America could become what it is and what its aspirations could happen. The OAS, election for Secretary General is next year. Is that correct?
Next year, March.
Next year, March.
Yes.
Okay, but I imagine a lot of the discussions are happening now.
Discussion to have to understand the problem of each country, to understand the vision for the region and for the hemisphere, to understand who's thinking North America, Central and South America, and Caribbean countries. There are nuances, there are differences, but always I get to understand that we have a common destination.
Absolutely. Well, thank you once again, and I hope the next time to come down to Asunción. And my biggest regret is I never spend more than one day in Asunción. I don't know why, but the next time
you have to organize.
Yeah,
I have had the honor to receive you in Asunción, but I hope that you spend more time to discover this beautiful country.
No, I every time I go there, I realize how beautiful it is, and I'm like, I should need to stay here more. My best regards to President Peña as well, and thank you again. If you're new to the Border Wars podcast, please be sure to subscribe to our channel. Be sure to hit the like button that helps us to promote this video. Please share this video with your friends and colleagues all throughout social media. We're available on all digital platforms. We thank the Foreign Minister of Paraguay for his very lengthy and comprehensive discussion. I think that, Latin America is one of the regions that often gets left out of big foreign policy discussions. But as you can tell, whether we're talking about Israel, we're talking about Ukraine, we're talking about Taiwan, or even issues in the hemisphere, Venezuela, there's a lot of challenges, and Paraguay has been able to take a leadership position on all of these challenges, but with a great vision for opportunities in the future. So thank you once again. Thank you all of you for listening and watching. We will see you at the next podcast.
Subscribe to the Border Wars Podcast and visit our website at securefreesociety.org. See you in the next episode.